This video is sponsored by DJ the Lazy Gamer, Zach Haji, and Zachary Hayes, and other patrons.
Flying aimlessly through space with the still heavily injured and unconscious Kakarot, Zarbon, and Tarble, having never gotten the chance to become close and still having both adrenaline and fear pumping through them, an argument was bound to ensue. Over comms, a mad scramble had started to figure out where they'd regroup to save the quickly fading Kakarot, and more importantly, escape Code's immediate grasp.
Everyone shut up! We have a few ships in our possession equipped with healing chambers. He'll be alright. No one regrets this outcome more than me. But worrying about Code now won't help us get out of here with our lives.
Tarble, for one, very much noticed the change in tone from his elder brother, but was distracted when groaning sounded behind he and Zarbon. The Conqueror of Frieza had awoken, and was now struggling to stand up, much to their chagrin, causing Zarbon to scoff and stretch the communicator to the sand, while easily forcing him to lay back down in that tired state.
Broly, you there?
He raggedly asked into the communicator, and waited, as it was quiet for a bit, before...
Go ahead, little brother.
Though his Eddie's tone belied the disquiet brewing from recent events.
Let's go home, so we can...
He's out cold,
Zarbon explained as he took the communicator from him. Broly couldn't believe he hadn't thought of that, but he had his mind so preoccupied with the major loss they had just suffered, coupled with the news of his father, and the other Saiyan's fate. He picks up the communicator to his mouth once more.
Not a bad idea. Everyone set course for Planet Vampa.
The now co-commander ordered before settling in for the trip. Back then, in the throne room of King Cold, Broly, Vegeta, and a handful of above-average rebels who miraculously survived thus far due to having the strongest their army had to offer as backup and the future vision of their commander Tulo. Together, they all continued their attempt at a revolt. He did not have perfect future perception, but Commander Tulo had done a damnably impressive job at explaining to the weaker forces that their role, including his, was that of distraction, to allow their heavy hitters the opportunities they need to land more critical attacks, and hopefully, a decisive one on King Cold. If the tides of battle shifted in his favor, mess up his next move and turn it back. Hit and run tactics to pester and impede Cold as much as possible, and all heightened with the advantage of very often being almost the perfect counter to what he was about to do, and in perfect synchronicity. Something the Cold Tyrant couldn't afford to deal with right now due to the aforementioned trump cards that were the genius elite generals of the rebels, and worse yet, two more of those Saiyans his son had wished to wipe out. Prince Vegeta, with his incredible battle prowess, which had only further prospered in putting himself in life-risking battles against fully trained soldiers and elites of the Frieza Force, rather than those that they would attempt to conquer. And worse than him was the controlled and locked-on rage of General Broly, as he fully harnessed and controlled the power of an Uzaru, even its size at times with help from his favorite Guardradian technique, making for truly devastating attacks. And Code could almost swear he'd begun to take more and more damage as the massive Saiyan seemed to grow stronger and enraged. Far past annoyed, Code was past the point of caring much for his throne room, especially as the next thing he knew, he had the former Saiyan Prince's feet slamming into the bottom of his jaw and rocketing him up into the massive and crushing hammer fist of Broly that drove him into his own throne room floor. Growling, he simply hugged the floor and could feel his capacity to exert a good bit of force and completely crush it and leave them all to die in the explosion, leaving him the sole survivor, only to be shocked once he feels a hand on his back and is instantly transmissioned by Vegeta to be held above the Saiyan's head, causing him to simply waste a large amount of ki into the open air.
Thanks for the warning, Tulo. He was just about to try it, and I'm getting better at that trick.
Fire!
Tulo commanded as he and the other soldiers grouped up and combined the strongest ki blast they could, which packed a decent wallop after the stacking damage. Code uncharacteristically growled and looked up, realizing something. That was a Kanasan, a race he remembered Frieza saying he'd had eradicated and sold the planet of. He didn't initially peg him to be that large a threat, but this wasn't the first time this battle a move of his authority with him at the center of it.
So that's it. You know, I couldn't put my finger on it until just now, but I think I figured out your people's little gift.
We called it a curse. Tulo responded hatefully as Code tried a different method. Using telekinesis on one of the many pieces the rubble made throughout the battle, he condensed and sharpened it, before flinging it silently towards the eyes of Broly. At least, this is what Tulo saw as he called out to Broly to move his head, causing the Saiyan to fall short on an attack he had been going for, and instantly and faithfully obey the order, only for Code to then dastardly swing its tail wildly into Broly's unmentionables, and spin before delivering a harsh back fist to the slightly weaker Vegeta, interrupting his attack as well, and letting him smash roughly into Broly, sending them both sprawling. Tulo, what was that? Moving my head didn't do anything there. Tulo? Broly sat up rubbing his head, and shuddered, now finally seeing where the rubble had hit. It currently stuck out of the wall behind Tulo, who was kneeling while clutching the hole it had made in his chest and struggling hard not to cough and do more internal damage to himself. Vegeta at this time also took notice and instantly went to frantically ordering the other rebels to get him back to the ship and into the healing chamber, but Cold cared not for sentimentality, and as soon as he saw an opening, went right for the kill on his second strongest threat, only for Broly's hand to just barely stop the former prince from being gored on the massive horns of King Cold, and sending both Saiyans sliding back slowly from the force. Having already done the same, he orders Vegeta to get a hold of himself and refocus on the battle, as the others can save Tulo while they cover their backs. But by the time he did, he witnessed Cold raising his leg up high before releasing a punch-like kick to the throne room floor, unimpeded this time. This caused a massive boom to crack and split the dome-like structure, allowing the vacuum of space to begin sucking out oxygen before the crack began to splinter and grow. Even King Cold wondered how his full power kick had been impeded, and looked down along Broly and Vegeta as the ground rumbled and broke apart. Tulo sat there knelt down, with his arms, or what remained of them, having blocked Cold's leg from completing the full arc of his kick.
Oh? You couldn't be an effective distraction, so you chose to be a meat shield. Seems you burnt up all your power and life force just for that. Seeing the future is indeed troublesome for those who aren't worthy of such a gift.
Tulo, though now nearly a corpse, stared up defiantly. Slowly, he began to reach up, as if to pull Cold closer to him to tell him something. The confident monarch sadistically had to hear his last words. Vegeta and Broly stared in shock.
I once feared the idea of your brood wielding this gift, but now I know exactly what you will see. The horror of your end!
Reaching the broken remnant of his hand up, Tulo jabbed the base of Cold's neck, stunning the Mad Emperor and actually causing him to writhe in pain and agony for some reason. As the broken revolutionary fell to the floor, he yelled out while staring to Broly and Vegeta.
Run, my sons!
With the air quickly running thin, Vegeta and Broly couldn't do much worth attacking as much as they wanted to. And so, the Saiyan Prince quaked a bit, as he locked into the nearby key of one of the fleeing rebel ships close outside the slowly exploding planet. With regret, Vegeta accepted this as a defeat and put his fingers to his head and his other hand on Broly's shoulder. The two then disappeared from the destructing throne room and reappeared inside the soon-to-flee ship, whose pilot was extremely confused, just citing Tulo's last orders for him to wait nearby.
Get us out of here!
Broly awoke as their ship jostled from the fierce turbulence of planet Vampa. Through the communicators, he could hear as other pilots began to struggle through it, and he jumped into action, ordering them all to look for bright patches of green and do their best to land there. All that did successfully were treated to an almost fluffy landing on a near gelatinous-like surface. Broly then quickly got out of his own ship as the ground began to shake, and he flew up to see the familiar landscape of Vampa and lots of Bob's family members rising up, angry at the harsh blow dealt to them by the fleet of ships. Though Broly did know beforehand they're all fierce and strong enough to be okay afterwards. For now, he needed to make sure they didn't take out their anger on his allies. Going into his Ikari form, he let out a loud bellowing yell that caused bright green sound waves to wash over the creatures and caused them to shine with the same eerie green glow and seemingly recognize something. They then seemed to sit at attention, staring at him anxiously like domesticated animals seeing their owner, and the Saiyan was very happy to see his idea had worked as he had never tried anything like it.
Did you use spirit control to make animal friends?
More or less. Where's Kakarot?
Vegeta explained that he'd made sure he was placed in a healing tank ASAP and had seemingly stabilized already. Now, they finally had to worry about their next biggest issue. Where was King Cold, and what was his next move? Meanwhile, after having survived the explosion of his favorite retirement planet, Cold had been aimlessly drifting through cold, dark, empty space, racked with visions and images of something. His empire collapsed around him, and then somehow the exact opposite. He is able to see the standoff Frieza went through, along with the defeat and later death that he suffered when going through a similar planetary explosion in one of his much weaker suppressed forms. He'd been cursed with a Kanasan future sight, and he was perceiving the changes and shifts of many possible futures, and even some happenings of the past it seemed. He began to notice a pattern, as his sanity and reasoning were anchored through pride alone. The visions of futures that benefited him began to show up less and less frequently until almost not at all, concerning his already stressed out psyche. Couple this with small glimpses of those Saiyans increasing their strength easily led him to a correct hypothesis. He wagered this meant the odds of the Saiyans winning in the long run were increasing, which made sense. They as a species had a dangerous gift of their own, and if battle made them stronger, then retreating and getting proper medical treatment would definitely increase survival odds, and thus the odds of winning the grander war. Even more so if they continue to do this training thing and increase their own power at such a rate. That seemed to be how this game was to be played, and this revelation gave the old tyrant his confidence back.
Simple. A gamble isn't so intimidating if you can stack the odds in your favor.
Now that Cold had a strategy, any wounds he had currently were superficial. What he needed now was to attempt to salvage whatever of Frieza and his forces he could. From there, he needed to get his head scientist Kikuno and to speak to Berry Blue. It was time to shore up their defenses and go back to recruiting for the Cold Empire. They had not been toppled just yet, only tripped up. Planet Vampa's strange day cycle already made sleep somewhat harsh at the new Rebellion HQ, but the rambunctious sparring matches of the new top brass made it even more so. Kakarot and Broly, since the younger Saiyan had first recovered, had almost endlessly started training together. And they certainly weren't the only ones intensely training in the meantime, as the suspense of waiting on King Cold's next move was a great motivator for some form of training. Things had only gotten more and more crazy since their last major update. The rebels had been very antsy after the first 7 days on the repugnant planet, and the Saiyans all being readily willing to devour the same Vampa beetles that Bob Beast did, also did very little to improve crew morale. Broly's newfound responsibilities had him putting off sparring with a newly healed and Zenkai'd Kakarot, who himself was particularly eager for a challenge and seemingly blind to the prevailing sense of loss permeating throughout the rest of the rebel army. Tarble himself, being saddened by the heavy losses sustained by both fronts, was almost put off by Kakarot's seeming elation at the demise of Frieza by his hands and indifferent to losing his biological brother and all his childhood mentors in one fell swoop. To his surprise, compared to when he'd last seen him when they were children though, Vegeta was his polar opposite. He'd been replaying the events with Tulo again and again in his head, with every mistake and inadequacy becoming more and more ingrained in his memory, something becoming clear. He needed more strength as a leader, as a Saiyan, and to make sure what happened would never come to pass again, putting him, like most of the other rebels, in a very fragile, anxious, and volatile state. And it just so happens that Kakarot's got nothing to do. During Broly's strategy meeting with his subordinates, a job he now realized how easy Tulo made look not only with his future sight, but his wisdom, those in charge of scouting and tracking the Cold Force's movements, those admittedly underqualified to run the healing chamber schedule and general health of their forces, and their contacts throughout the galaxy, are gathered either in person or through communication. But Broly is interrupted and honestly a little embarrassed by loud booms and the shaking of the ground. In the middle of their camp, 2 Saiyans began going at it and causing chaos, while Zarbon, Tarble, and a few other rebels tried to stop them. While this was something Broly had been waiting for, he had hoped it wouldn't take place until much later. There are much larger priorities right now, and from the look of things, this fight had stopped being friendly a long time ago. Vegeta seemed to be using this as an opportunity to release his pent-up frustrations, which of course Kakarot took the opportunity to return in kind, unknowingly tapping into what is recognized as the Super Saiyan form, something that took Vegeta by surprise. He flung his hands up, stopping the transformed Kakarot in its tracks, as he recognized this to be a placating gesture, as Vegeta spoke.
How do I achieve that state? Please tell me!
Kakarot seemed shocked by the question, but his answer to it was casually continuing the rest of his punch and slugging Vegeta to the ground while laughing at him. The prince shook off the admittedly subdued blow, but couldn't stop the spark of his own anger at being attacked by an ally in such a way, causing him to burst back to his feet ready to fight again.
Don't you realize how many comrades we've lost? The allies we can never get back while Cold still breathes, and you have the nerve to laugh! Every one of us is struggling to find a way to make that worth something.
Kakarot only gave a cold smirk and gestured to Vegeta to come at him with a clenched fist. All he was thinking about was fighting for the sake of fighting. He wanted to test himself and nothing more. With the boost from Vegeta's rage and creative use of his still-growing instant transmission technique and other fighting tech quickly made up for a good bit of the power difference, and with satisfying blows, he sought to punch the cold-hearted Kakarot, almost as if rejecting his past self in doing so. But Kakarot only responded by no longer holding back and rebuking the sentiment with renewed viciousness.
Cut the sensitive crap, Vegeta. You don't know a damn thing about me. The Nappa Force and I risked our lives with every mission we went on. We all knew what standing up against Frieza meant. Nappa, Raditz, Beats, Paragus, they were bodies to throw at Frieza and they died a death worthy of a Saiyan warrior. That's enough! If we succumb to infighting now, then every sacrifice would be meaningless, and I will not allow that to happen. Am I understood?
But Kakarot was already walking away, when suddenly,
I still can't believe this ragtag group has taken down Frieza.
the rebels all froze at the sound of an unfamiliar voice in their heads.
Yo, can you all hear me?
The voice introduced itself as King Kai, and as far as they were all concerned, he was sort of the boss of the galaxy. Of course, this all brought up tons of questions. How? Why did Frieza and Cold have such a grip on the galaxy then? How were they speaking? Whose side was he on? And most importantly, why contact them now?
As for that last one, oh, would you get over here, you stick in the mud? You're making my job so much harder. You were supposed to arrive the same day you died, you know.
Everyone is further confused by the new magic voice now arguing with someone they couldn't hear or see, until a familiar voice thought never to be heard again sounded in their heads.
As I've told you countless times now, our assistance is unnecessary. They will handle this.
It was unmistakably the voice of Tulo, and as soon as it was heard, Vegeta and Broly excitedly greeted the supposed ghost of their mentor figure, who lightened his tone to greet all his rebels.
We're speaking now because King Yama and I found out what he did to distract Cole during that battle and save the rest of you.
At the silence, it was clear King Kai wanted Tulo to reveal this. With a heavy sigh, the Kanasan spoke again.
I left King Cold with a gift.
The implication was somehow instantly understood, and of course this is met with shock and scorn. Even the new top brass seemed a bit shaken to know their foe was now that much more deadly, but Vegeta and Broly asked the others not to hold the sacrifice Tulo made for them that gave them a final shot against King Cold against him. The ability to see the future never made them invincible, and it wouldn't do the same for Cold either.
If we could be overwhelmed, the same is and always has been true for Cold.
It's exactly why Frieza feared us. Those legends have haunted them, and now we'll make good on them.
The total morale seemed to waver, while Kakarot seemed to somehow share Tulo in the same commander's attitude. Budging into the center of the basic huddle the insurgency had made around Broly and the now returned Vegeta, Kakarot again reached out to the power he was beginning to truly grasp and again flashed into the Super Saiyan state.
You're right, seeing the future just means seeing me stand over your corpse. Just give me Cold's location and I'll handle finishing him off all on my own.
I'm afraid that's not possible anymore. He's already gotten far stronger than he was last time, and he's gathering some dangerous allies.
Vegeta then remembered the first lesson Tulo ever taught them.
We can't see the gap in power and waste time wishing to close it. The only way to do so is put resolve in your heart and train.
He almost recited. In the other world, Tulo only smiled and took his arm away from King Kai's shoulder. He knew it was right, and he had prepared them for this. With King Kai's help, the surveillance of King Cold was now child's play, though the signal the deity could get was now experiencing interference, and the hypothesis was that who or whatever Cold was working with had something to do with it. As the top brass had said, training and preparations began in earnest. Those with talents lying solely in combat were first commissioned to rest before attempting to hone their strength further. Lots pushed on by Tulo's mention of training of the afterlife to be with them in spirit, and apparently enjoying a gravity very much like that of Vegeta's homeworld. Eliciting a bit of an idea from the Saiyan Prince, though he realized he'd be hard-pressed to pull it off with his current means. For his own training, he'd pretty much gone back to basic exercise, with the odd sparring with his brother, and the last-minute hero Zarbon. He was reviewing the basis of everything he'd learned up till now, and seeing what small improvements could still be made to them, as he bided his time. Apparently, Broly really wanted to put in some personal work with Kakarot before they came together for training again, so for now, he would wait and polish up his own skills. Across the universe, though, a cloaked figure is led through the corridors of a remaining Frieza Force main fleet ship by none other than Barry Blue. The person seemed a tad bit nervous about being here but followed forwards faithfully, as if driven by something. Finally, a single room of the ship is arrived at, and with the opening of the doors, a strange sight is seen. King Cold is sat conscious and suspended in fluid of a healing tank. The strange part was that the battered and broken body of a creature similar to him, that we know as Frieza's second form, is suspended in a healing chamber directly next to his own, though this one is clearly dead. It was a curious sight indeed.
Please enter and relax. I've been wanting to meet you, great wizard Babidi.
The tyrant's speech was somewhat labored in his current state. He could tell the small creature had many questions for him, and so a dialogue began between the two. Cold reveals a few of his cards, number 1 of which being that he can currently see the future, and number 2 of which being he knows exactly what Babidi wants, and notes that they are probably both aware of how severe his need for competent muscle to back him up would be for his plan, or else the same nuances he currently had to deal with would one day impede him as well. Babidi on the inside could only celebrate the opportunity. With a pawn such as the old cold tyrant under his control, his quest for Majin Buu would become that much simpler.
Why, of course, my lord. My allegiance belongs to you and you alone from here forth. How may I serve you?
You have a way to further increase my base power, do you not? Do so now. It will make the current process much simpler.
Babidi blinked in shock at having the exact circumstance he wanted arrived at immediately. He could now make his move unabated and unquestioned.
Para-pa-pa! 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 Para-pa-pa-pa!
Babidi chanted. King Cold's eyes widened and seemingly blinked, as an M mark appeared on his forehead and his healing body seemingly began to do so at a faster pace. Meanwhile, the corpse of Frieza was visibly deteriorating from its tank, and as it did, it visibly began to make Cold look younger.
This is incredible! Lord Cold's vitals are spiking and stabilizing. He is in better condition than the first recovery, and stronger than ever before.
First recovery? Thought Bobbity while looking at the little yellow alien. The other scientist sat on the other side of the room, at a computer, seemingly uninvolved. Then, a grunt from King Cold brought attention back to him as he regained consciousness and looked back to Bobbity with a sinister smirk, mirrored by the little wizard.
Perfect. Now that I have you as a tool, I can awaken Majin
You control absolutely no one, you little fool. I was fully aware of what your technique would do.
Cold boasted as he began to climb out of the healing chamber, the other tank now also empty. He stalked menacingly towards Bobbity, who scurried backwards and was pinned between the wall and Cold, who leaned down to explain the hierarchy better.
Listen here, I have gathered the greatest scientific mind in my empire. You, the descendant of that foul creature's creator, and this man.
Cold gestured towards the other scientist, who finally stood to reveal himself. It was a being of another nearly extinct race, but one done in not in by the Cold Force, but by the barbaric Saiyans before they had been affiliated with it. A man who'd surely be motivated against Saiyan enemies.
Dr. Mew at your service. My Lord Cold, the designs for my invention are now complete, and I can begin construction extremely quickly with your generous funds. I call it the Big Getty Star. If we can successfully combine Bobbity's magic with Kikuno and I's mechanical genius, the future you foresaw is highly likely.
Cold looked very pleased, and then began to laugh to himself maniacally. He swept a hand out with a flourish, and then gouged it into his own chest, and twisted it to do even more damage, hacking up blood as he did so, and smiling all the way through it to Bobbity's horror and confusion. The wizard questioned what Cold could possibly be thinking as the mad tyrant lifted back up and re-entered the healing chamber before he spoke.
With every augmentation and recovery from severe damage, I grow more powerful. The myth of Super Saiyans is proven to be true in the downfall of my son. And I can tell you for certain the Saiyans are currently devising a way to evolve themselves to a higher height once again. They are a filthy breed that lower themselves to struggling for power they do not deserve. If they find that pursuit so noble, I will sully it and make a mockery of them in the most effortless way possible. I will use every weakness against them and every advantage I can afford myself, and I will crush those that oppose me in every manner possible. Now bow down!
Back on Vampa, Broly and Kakarot were currently training in a very specific way. A very close-range fist fight with no major use of any ki blasts or techniques, just slugging each other.
If you want to learn how to best control your rage, the best thing to do is get hit in a friendly spar and learn how to harness the energy of anger instead of falling prey to it.
He would reason before he would begin raining down hellish blows on the Kakarot, who by this point thought of every way he could to counter the parameters, none of which quite cutting it. Though thankfully, by now going into Super Saiyan was becoming seamless, and the extra power it granted made Broly much easier to deal with. But the training as a whole was still very difficult, and would only get more strenuous as it went on, resulting in many a time for Kakarot's counter blows to slow down and leave him open to harshly be tagged. Or would he attempt to weave away from his older brother's blows slyly, only for Broly to abuse his speed for how much larger he was, and simply shoulder check Kakarot down in a flash. He'd then progress no further and calmly ask Kakarot to stick to the course they'd set, meaning no dodging. This indeed drew a burst of rage out of Kakarot, who grit his teeth and surged at Broly with his fist cocked back for a much-too-telegraphed haymaker, which Broly actually allowed to slam mostly harmlessly into his nose, though his facial expression remained calm, as if he'd already been ready to allow Kakarot to take some stress out on a punching bag. The thing was, he knew his baby brother needed one that could hit back and had to balance both.
Walk me through the goal of this training one more time. We need to overwhelm Cold.
Broly began to say.
The best way I see to do that is to further increase your power and take advantage of our Saiyan abilities.
Kakarot had long ago pulled his fist back, and the two now stood in front of each other for a breather.
I can imagine a few possible outcomes. Number 1, Vegeta, Tarbell, and I all reach it too. Number 2, only I learn it and somehow figure out how to mix it with my Ikari state. But there's issues with that since Vegeta was never able to, and admittedly he may be more talented than you naturally. And number 3, the thing which I think is the easiest and obvious.
Broly said as he glanced at Kakarot's tail, not unaware that the drilling of not looking up at the moon needlessly was still ever present for his younger brother in Tarbell.
Going Great Ape and trying to stack it with Super Saiyan.
Kakarot recited, now remembering the third possible route to power Broly had thought about. He had at first attempted to introduce a fourth option and allowing him to try and experiment with Super Saiyan itself, and see if it could possibly be pushed further somehow, but Broly quickly reasoned that may take longer than just teaching it. At any moment, the final battle with King Cold could come, so the quickest methods would be the best right now. After such a review and a clear look at the state that Kakarot was in with their current method, Broly decided to be a bit more heavy-handed and levied an order.
Go ask Tarble and Vegeta the secret to controlling it.
Kakarot gave an "are you serious" look to his older brother figure, about to argue, but the Saiyan's slightly less calm and disappointed expression at his refusal halted him. Remember, though Bardock had grown strong enough to become an elite in this timeline, it's not like that title means Paragus or anyone else in the Nappa Force would have had much time or a legitimate reason to teach Kakarot how to control the Ozaru form in the time leading up to now. Frieza didn't want the Nappa Force growing stronger, so if a planet needed the Ozaru to take it down, then they wouldn't be deployed to it. Though, he too could realize if he didn't make some kind of move, then not only would he gain no new strength, Broly would be upset with him, and they may just end up dead anyway.
Less trouble to just ask the wannabe prince.
Broly gave a glare at the unnecessary dig towards their comrade while he wasn't even around, causing Kakarot to give a slight flinch and quickly seek out Vegeta's ki to burst into the air in his direction and away from his stern pseudo-family member. During his flight though, it dawned on him somewhat that this was the first time he'd gotten to take a flight around the planet he'd spent his tender years on by himself and with no one in his ear about war. The nostalgia and atmosphere set his mind at ease, and he took a bit longer than he needed to go and speak to Vegeta, enjoying his freedom and zipping around his old stomping grounds like he never could as a kid, until he felt all the ki of the many rebels. He was beginning to somewhat be able to sense emotions and intent in those emotions, and it sickened him to realize that the cloudy aura of war now permeated and stunk up his once free and rambunctious Vampa. His flight now soured, he finally headed towards Vegeta and his crew with some purpose, arriving extremely quickly obviously. There, he saw the hard-fought spar Vegeta was putting Tarble and Zarbon through, all while keeping his eyes closed and sensing the attacker's ki rather than using his senses for pinpoint perfect dodging and quick effortless counterattacks, leaving his opponents tuckered out just from not connecting and wasting so much energy, all while Vegeta kept on his toes and bounced around. He took notice of their fatigue and was aware that Kakarot now watched them.
Not a bad job, you two. You're good at fighting together.
He praised the strange duo, who looked at each other curiously once this was said, neither unaware of the slight visual motif their duo shared with one Vegeta made up with Broly, as well as the fact their on-the-fly combination were simple 1-2 setup combos with little time to put towards any kind of real synchronized and practiced techniques. Both sweat drop at the hollow compliment and realized Vegeta probably wasn't the best judge of this, while probably just using this for a good way to work out, causing him to share a tired laugh as Kakarot hopped down behind Vegeta, who turned to look at him neutrally. This was instantly very awkward for Kakarot, as he was forced to deal with the consequences for his actions that violence wouldn't solve. After a bit, he stilled himself and opened his mouth to ask his question, only for Vegeta to then finally interrupt by asking what he was doing there cluelessly, flustering Kakarot and getting a chuckle out of Vegeta at correctly reading the other Saiyan.
Look, I apologize for hitting you, but I gotta ask you.
Apologize about disrespecting our comrades before me. Also for laughing at me. That was rude.
Kakarot's eyes twitched at the earnest and almost deliberately annoying purity of such a statement, but reluctantly, he recited the apologies, and Vegeta this time allowed him to finish his question, which was of course about Ozaru control, which also perked the somewhat recovered Tarble's ears, as he and Zarbon distastefully scarfed down on their lunch of Vampa beetles, and he took notice of the big grin Vegeta now wore.
Well, since you and I are even now, the trading of info should be mutual. You get the secrets to the Ozaru if I get the secrets to Super Saiyan.
Kakarot rolls his eyes, having expected such honestly, but soon realizes he hasn't ever verbalized the process, and so had a bit of trouble doing so now.
Fine. Basically, you have to die.
His response was a silent and confused blank expression from the other two Saiyans and Zarbon as he joined them.
But then don't die and become a raging, vengeful ghost.
Vegeta and Tarble blink again while looking at Kakarot oddly, mostly because that just didn't make sense to them. Nevertheless, Vegeta tried to base a theory from it as he had nothing else to go off of.
You're saying you need to be pushed to the edge of death. Could it have something to do with our Zenkais? And you said rage, so extreme anger in the edge of death, huh?
Something like that. Now your side of the bargain.
Vegeta smiles back and simply explains the concept.
Basically, you can't submit to your primal instincts.
The exact opposite of what had just happened takes place when Tarble speaks up.
When Saiyans become an Ozaru, there's a subconscious submission to the feral battle instinct. If you maintain a sense of self and will yourself to, you can make those feral instincts instead submit to you in a way and be coherent in the form. It actually has to do with Blux waves and brain chemistry, but I don't think you'd care.
Kakarot smirks and chuckles genuinely at that, before leaving to resume his training with renewed vigor. The idea sounded simple enough in principle, and now it's time for results. As he left, Vegeta would grow quiet and introspective as he came up with a new plan for his and Tarbo's training. Staring up at Vampa's sky, he looked to his younger brother next to him and shocked him with his plan. Once Kakarot returned to Broly and revealed the lesson he'd learned, he was instantly spurred on into trying it, when for the first time on Planet Vampa, Kakarot purposely looked up at its massive moon and began to flood his body with Blux waves, and he quickly began to grow and morph into the more savage Saiyan transformation. Curious that the lesson he'd learned had helped, Broly stared down his now massive younger brother and subordinate, hoping to see some sign of his control of the state as he did with Super Saiyan.
Kakarot, you okay?
Hard to think.
It seemed as if the man he viewed as a little brother was in pain, causing Broly to worry some, but Kakarot stubbornly clung to his sanity, fighting the primal power, attempting to bend it to his will instead of the other way around. He was the Super Saiyan, and this stupid monkey power was little more than noise to him, a means to an end of not Broly or Vegeta or even in the universe's goals, but his own and his own freedom. And there was just one thing he'd been wanting to do with that freedom again for a long time.
Broly, fight me!
Kakarot roared. The commander could tell why he wanted this. His brother, since he'd met him, had learned and lived through struggle and combat, as far back as when he tried his hardest to force Paragus to recognize him and train the two alongside one another. There was a period that Kakarot had long ago seemed to lose, that he only now saw when Kakarot was fighting for his own reasons and enjoying himself while doing so. Honestly, just seeing that gave him some hope, and excited his Saiyan instincts as well.
Come at me, soldier.
Broly said, getting into a combat stance as the massive ape flew at him. Skipping forward some, time passed tensely as there was still no movement from the enemy. The Saiyans and rebels would work tirelessly to achieve their increases in power, needed to overwhelm their already overwhelming and now precognition opponent. And progress was slow, even though training was done at a frantic and almost fearful speed. Kakarot's progress with Oozaru came in steps, first conquering his primal fighting instincts to return to the more controlled and methodical method of combat he tempered in the Frieza Fort. Next came finding a balance and comfort in the much larger and heavier form, something Broly was actually the perfect teacher for, allowing the brothers to immaturely test their strength against each other in those giant states. Finally, once those first two goals had been accomplished, both Broly and Kakarot himself reasoned that the stacking of Oozaru form with Kakarot's Super Saiyan state should now theoretically be possible. And on this day, it will be attempted. Meanwhile, a pair of biological Saiyan brothers were also hard at work with their training.
Vegeta really is gonna kill us.
Tarbo would constantly think, as he and Vegeta would continue to day by day act in harsh spars high above Planet Vampa's surface, and oftentimes inside one of its very rough and vicious outer layers of turbulence, where it was very hard to breathe, see, and move around, much less fight. Vegeta had reasoned that Cold's #1 advantage would always be his ability to survive the vacuum of space. It made any place they fought his turf by birthright. Saiyans couldn't survive in space, but they did have incredibly adaptable bodies. And it was also once thought that Saiyans couldn't defeat Frieza or his father, or defend weaker races in their freedom. If the path to Super Saiyan was scorned with death, and they also had a weakness to overcome anyway, then it made sense to kill 2 space bursts with 1 ki blast, and train for both at the same time. Hence, Tarbo and Vegeta's new training regimen of hardcore drag-out sparring nearly in space. And to their credit, their lungs are getting stronger and allowing them to operate with less and less oxygen, but they would always be unable to do so with absolutely none. Vegeta then reasoned they needed to somehow use their ki, or spirits, to somehow insulate and hold a certain amount of oxygen so as to make up for this, but it was extremely hard to do so without a massive amount of power. At this point, causing Tarbo to very much wish he could still be training with Zarbon and the other rebels, since Frieza's former lackey had been given the job of group training against the rebel soldiers, allowing them to gain even more experience against a superior opponent with the transformation, while that opponent could still get a decent amount of training in. The tired former princes were just about to call their training for the day when the unmistakable power of Kakarot, which had already been very easy to sense alongside Broly's, seemed to explode almost exponentially. This seemed to suggest that the double power-up had somehow worked, and they excitedly went down to witness it. But Vegeta then sensed that the spirit of Kakarot had just become massively distorted and very upset. Even more so than when he'd first assumed the Great Ape form, causing Vegeta to believe that there was something very wrong. And he couldn't be more right, because on that day, nearly all life on planet Vampa vanished. But that, Plus Soldier fam, is where we'll be leaving this story off for right now. Hey, Plus Soldier fam, really quick before you guys click off, I would like to give some shoutouts and general updates. Number 1 being a massive shout out to all the artists who contributed visuals for this video. All the way from Maxiu Chia22 and his official video game renders, to the commissioned artworks we had from Zaw77S, who I absolutely love working with, and you have not seen all the stuff he has made for this series yet, and a lot of other series, so I cannot wait for that. To Ghost Rider, who made some really amazing custom sprites for this one, as well as some made with the Japil Dragon Ball Fusion generator. Hey, quick interjection from Future Plus Ultra here. We also have to give a shout out to Radamanti Cards. He is the one who drew the Tarbo and Namek armor that I used for this video. Just wanted to make sure he got proper credit for that since I did not personally commission that from him. I'll obviously be leaving a link to all of these awesome artists in the description below. Another big shout out goes to this video's editor, Ace the Windrider, a good friend and also a voice actor of the channel. You guys should check out his YouTube channel, The Ranger Base, where he usually analyzes Pokemon with a real world twist. And if you like my thumbnails, you'll love a lot of his as they are made by me. Not to mention, the dude just gives really good takes on Pokemon and makes really cool videos, as you can see by this one. As for me, I just want to thank you guys for almost 52,000 subscribers at the time of recording, as well as thanking you for your patience with the release of this video. This one was kind of hard to get out, not only because of school when I was initially trying to get it out, but just because of how much I really want this story to be as good as it can be. So thank you again for your patience, and as always, I'm going to ask you for more of it. I also know in every part of this series, I have said the next part will be its finale, but this time I am much more confident about that statement. Next part will be a little bit longer than this one, I'm sure, but it will be a final conclusion to this story, and I can guarantee you no one knows where it's going. Oh, also, please make sure you guys are subscribed. Only about 52% of my viewers are, and we are currently trying to reach 75,000 subscribers by August 26, 2021, to celebrate the channel's 3rd year anniversary at 750,000 subscribers. Be sure to hit the notification bell as well, watch my community tab with Anime Eyes so you don't miss any updates, and be sure to follow me on my various social medias for all kinds of sneak peeks and exclusives, all in the description below. Last as always, but just as important as ever, we have our amazing patrons who get their end of video shoutouts. You guys know the drill. In Hero tier, Lone from McQuaid, Stefan Consfront, Superior, and Samuel Viveros. In Shinobi tier, The True Black Star and Shannon Roberts. In Z-Warrior tier, Narku and Normandy 1998. In Beyond tier, Crimson Manifesto, Don, Knuckles OX, and Pizza 15X. And in the Plus Ultra tier, DJ the Lazy Gamer, Zach Haji, and Zachary Hayes. Patreon support over the last year has been life-saving, and the patrons have been waiting for this project for a very long time, honestly longer than the normal audience has, so I truly hope they have enjoyed this part. And if you would like to join their ranks and support me and the channel directly, consider supporting Plus Ultraman on Patreon, again, in the description below. That's all I have for this one, you all. So happy Pride Month, take care of yourselves and the world around you, remember Black Lives Matter, trans rights are human rights, and that I love you in a very non-parasocial way. And as always, go beyond Plus Ultra. See you guys next time.